The 31st session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. May I request everyone to rise for the prayer. Good and gracious God, we give thanks for the countless blessings and mercies you have shown us. We come to you today, O Lord, asking for your guidance and wisdom. Grant us unity of heart and mind to consider the responsibilities and challenges before us today. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, and continue to remind us that we do and all that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, for the service of the people, and for your greater glory. Send your spirit of compassion to dwell in our midst. May we be mindful of the needs of all, accept our responsibilities, act with courage, and help us to be considerate and just in our decisions that will affect our country. We offer this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. With the permission of the chamber, we suspend for 1 minute. With the permission of the chamber, we resume the session. The secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S, Cayetano Pia S, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Onasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Trilon.
13 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 30th Session, 28th of October, 2014, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? The reading of the Journal of Session number 30 is hereby dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of
The
business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 2439 entitled An Act Rationalizing the Income Requirements for the Creation of a Municipality, the Declaration of Highly Urbanized Status in the case of component cities, and the creation of a province, amending for the purpose sections 442A, 452A, 453, and 461A and C of Republic Act number 7160 is amended, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, introduced by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Local government.
Senate number 2440, an act declaring baybayin as the national writing system of the Philippines, providing for its promotion, protection, preservation, and conservation, and for other purposes by Senator Legarda.
Cultural communities, education, arts, and culture.
Resolutions, PS Resolution number 984, directing the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture to look into the continued deterioration and destruction of important heritage structures and trees with the end view of strengthening the implementation of the country's heritage protection laws by Senator Legarda.
Education, arts, and culture, environment, and natural resources.
Committee report number 87, submitted jointly by the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance on Senate Joint Resolution number 10, introduced by Senator Escudero, entitled Joint Resolution Extending the Period for Filing of Claims for Reparation of Human Rights Violations Victims under Republic Act number 10368, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013, and in consequence thereof, the existence of the Human Rights Victims Claims Board, recommending its approval with amendments taking into consideration Senate number 2418, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
Calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I'd like to acknowledge a number of guests here today. First of all, the delegation of Vietnamese Technology Management PhD students from Southern Leyte State University headed by Mrs. Gloria Marquez Reyes, SLSU President.
We welcome the delegation of Vietnamese technology management PhD students from the Southern Leyte State University. We make their presence of record. The group is headed by Mrs. Gloria Marquez Reyes, the president of the Southern Leyte State University. Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, we also have Director Karen Dumpit of the Commission on Human Rights and Undersecretary Chito Gascon, board member of the Human Rights Victims Claims Board.
The presence of Dr. Dumpit and Undersecretary Gascon is made of record, and we welcome them to the Senate.
Mr. President, yesterday, Senator Legarda had a privileged speech regarding the ASEAN economic integration and micro, small, and medium enterprises, and this was referred to my committee. For the record, I would just like to mention that I'm in full support of this move, and I welcome the good senator's speech, and we'll be tackling this in our committee.
For the record, the committee, your committee, Mr. Acting Majority Leader, is which committee is this?
Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Mr. President.
Duly noted, yes.
Mr. President, at this point, we would like to move that Senator Lauren Legarda be recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to read my full speech. However, due to my limited speaking voice today, I would abbreviate it and simply read snippets from this speech, which is very important because this month, October, is International DRR Month, Mr. President. For those who still do not understand, DRR stands for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the International Day for DRR was October 13. It was probably not highlighted in the media or even in the Senate, but that is very important. So allow me to put into the record the whole speech, but with the permission of the Chamber, may I just read highlights of this speech, Mr. President. We know that future communities in the Philippines will vastly differ from the ones we live in today. And as we witness the 21st century unfold, our nation faces a new set of technological, socio-economic, and global challenges that are more complex than any of us have had experienced in our shared history. And they dramatically alter the way we live in our communities, and at stake is the quality of life, not only of ours, but of our progeny. And we know that in previous studies done by Oxford University of Climate Change in late 2009, the Philippines registered the highest level of concern for climate change among 54 countries surveyed, while 78% of Filipino respondents said they were actually very concerned about climate change. 5 years hence, today in 2014, that concern is no longer simply an abstract understanding of climate change. Over the past years, our people have experienced this in many natural hazards from Ondoy, Sendong, Pepeng, Haiyan, etc. And we've seen how it has affected not only our GDP and GNP, Mr. President, but even the lives of millions of Filipinos to this day. We've always seen that the World Bank has warned that a 4 degrees rise Celsius would cause flooding in many coastal cities. It would mean dryness in dry regions, expected to become drier, and wet regions will become wetter. There will be extreme heat waves, water scarcity, health will be affected, stronger tropical cyclones, and the loss of biodiversity. Imagine with a 1.5 to 2% rise in temperature, 1/3 of the flora and fauna in the world would be at risk of extinction. And that would have negative impact not only on biodiversity, not only on livelihood, but on the health of our people as well. There is no more fitting time to say that reducing disaster risk and climate-proofing our livelihood and development gains and goals have become a moral imperative for governments and a social responsibility for all of us now. And we've seen how having less in life means losing life, meaning the most vulnerable and marginalized and the poor are even those who lose life itself because of climate change. And therefore, allow me to just point out that we have seen how those who are most vulnerable, like the persons with disabilities and the elderly, are the most affected. And no less than the UN Office for Disaster Reduction has highlighted this. In fact, in 2013, the focus was on persons with disabilities. And for this year, it is vulnerability and strengths of the elderly were highlighted. Why PWDs? PWDs are disproportionately affected by disasters. A survey by the UNISDR among persons with disabilities revealed that when a disaster occurs, 80% said they would be unable to evacuate immediately without difficulty. 6% say they would not be able to evacuate at all. 71% of the respondents say they do not have any personal disaster protection plan. 31% always say they have someone to help them evacuate, while 13% never have anyone to help them. Older persons, why am I focusing on the elderly? As the UNISDR has surveyed them this year, imagine, Mr. President, when Hurricane Katrina happened in the United States, over 75% of those killed by the hurricane were over 60. But actually, they only comprise 15% of the population in New Orleans. And during the 2011 Japan earthquake, 56% of those who died were 65 years old and above, but they comprise only 23% of the population. What am I saying? So you are already vulnerable because of your age and you're elderly, and because of your vulnerability because you're a person with disability. And still, you are made more vulnerable because of the lack of preparedness. And that stands to reason why the UN has dedicated these 2 years, 2013 and 2014, to persons who are elderly and to persons with disability. And that is the reason why I am standing here today, Mr. President, because it is the last working day of October, which is DRR month, and I believe that we should focus on disaster risk reduction in this country where 20 or more typhoons or natural hazards hit us every year. As our nation strives for equitable socio-economic development and inclusive development amid many recurring calamities, it is essential that we preserve our development gains. All sectors of society must come together now and respond as one against disaster risk. Building resilience should be everybody's business, and there should be a change of attitude with regards to this. With this kind of mindset, we can promote the scaling up of existing government programs to rectify the social and economic structures that breed disaster risk and trap the poor and the vulnerable citizens in the vicious cycle of risk and poverty. The road towards resilience may be tough. We can meet apathy, ignorance, lack of interest. However, there is much to be done, and we are here to assist in that development. But with the right attitude and a strong resolve, we will be able to weather the many challenges of our fast-changing environment. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just request that my whole speech be incorporated in the records. I abbreviated it because of my lack of speaking voice today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bongbong Marcos and then Senator Pimentel are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to commend, as usual, the good senator for her consistent and passionate advocacy of the protection of the environment, and besides that, the disaster risk management. I would just like to commend this, particularly on this, because although we have spent a lot of time and effort on the mainstream, we are now starting to look after the marginalized. We are talking about those who are disabled and those who are elderly, and I suppose we could include, if we take that further, also the very young. So I would just like to be put on the list of Senator Lauren Legarda, so that we in Ilocos Norte, who were just hit by a very strong typhoon and who are recognized as being part of the Typhoon Alley of the Philippines, we would like to know the details of all of these surveys and these studies, simply because it is something that will be very applicable to us. As we all know, the Ilocos region sends most of the OFWs that we have going abroad, and what are left behind are their parents, grandparents, the elderly, and the very young. And that is why this is of particular importance to us. That is all, Mr. President. Just a
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Senator Marcos for that. In fact, in the next visit of the UN officials, who continue to train and give their technical assistance to the Philippines. And I'm speaking about Margareta Wallstrom, the special representative of Ban Ki-moon. May I bring her to your region so that your good sister, the governor, can meet her as well. And perhaps Ilocos Norte, among many provinces, can be a template or a model for DRR, which you already have. I know that you have a very proactive DRR component in the province, and perhaps to update it and also to have a special program for the vulnerable sectors, including the young, the women, the children, the elderly, and the PWDs. Perhaps Ilocos Norte could be one of the model provinces.
Well, I thank the good senator for that very generous offer, and of course we would like to be associated and involved in all of these disaster and risk management that is being evolved as time goes on with the onset of climate change. So I thank her for that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Same commendation, Mr. President, for the timely reminder from our climate change and disaster risk reduction champion in the Senate. Thank you for reminding us that October is a very important month in DRR. And for the record, Mr. President, I'd like to associate myself with the speech, the message, as well as the advocacy of the good lady senator. And for the record, I want to make it of record that I am her disciple, one of her disciples in her efforts to propagate consciousness as well as involvement in disaster risk reduction and climate change awareness. So congratulations, Madam Senator, for the timely speech and reminder.
Thank you very much to the bar top notcher, and it is indeed an honor to be called you a disciple, a bar top notcher as a disciple of the humble of this humble representation. I would also like to encourage you to continue your DRR workshops, because you come from a city in the region that has been badly hit in the past, and you have embraced it as your personal advocacy as well. So I would like to support that, and I hope that you can continue that in many other regions of the country.
Yes, ma'am. I will continue with my DRR summits. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, and for the record, we'd also like to mention that we're very supportive of Senator Legarda's advocacies on DRR, and in fact, we have been doing a lot of work with youth organizations and disaster risk reduction as well.
Thank you very much, and perhaps we can also engage the youngest senator of the Senate in our DRR workshops for the youth and for micro-enterprises, since we know the most vulnerable livelihoods are the micro-enterprises, which comprise 98% of our economy, and which is a backbone of the Philippine economy. If you don't take care of it, it could really spell negatively, have a negative impact on our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I move that we refer the speech of Senator Legarda and the rest of the interpellations and comments to the Committee on Climate Change.
So referred.
Mr. President, some administrative matters. On January 27, 2014, the Senate in plenary approved the primary referral of Senate Bill number 2080 to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, while secondary referral was made to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move to interchange the primary and secondary referrals so that upon approval of this motion, the primary referral of Senate Bill number 2080 shall be the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, while the secondary be the Committee on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes. I so move, Mr. President.
Before the chair acts on the motion, may the chair be informed on the subject matter of Senate Bill number 2080. The title,
Mr. President, this is regarding the death penalty.
The death penalty.
Yes.
The restoration of the death penalty. Yes, that being within the primary jurisdiction of the Committee on Justice, the motion of the Majority Leader is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87 is transferred from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
And with the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Joint Resolution number 10, Joint Resolution extending the period for filing of claims for reparation of human rights violations victims under Republic Act number 10368, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Pimentel to sponsor the measure.
Senator Pimentel is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President, my dear colleagues, as Chairman of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, this representation humbly submits before this August Chamber for consideration Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87 entitled Joint Resolution Extending the Period for Filing of Claims for Reparation of Human Rights Violations Victims under Republic Act number 10368, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013. One of our key legislations that sought to uphold the constitutional mandate to value the dignity of every human being and to guarantee full respect for human rights is Republic Act number 10368, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013. Under this law, the state recognized that atrocities were committed during one of our nation's darkest episodes and affirmed its responsibility to recompense those whose rights were violated and impaired. For this purpose, the Human Rights Victims Claims Board was established and given a strict mandate to complete its task within 2 years from the time the laws implementing rules and regulations are promulgated. RA 10368 further provides that human rights victims or their heirs can file their claims with the Human Rights Victims Claims Board within 6 months, reckoned from the issuance of RA 10368's implementing rules and regulations. Otherwise, their claim shall be forever barred. Considering that the implementing rules and regulations of this law took effect last May 12, 2014, human rights victims have until November 10 of this year to file their claims with the Human Rights Victims Claims Board. So in the same fashion, the Human Rights Victims Claims Board would have to complete its task by May of 2016. Unfortunately, since it began accepting claim applications, the Human Rights Victims Claims Board has encountered an unprecedented number of applications from human rights victims. So the Human Rights Victims Claims Board thus anticipates that with the sheer number of these applications, compounded by its undermanned staff, it may not be able to accomplish its duties within the period fixed by law. Thus, was not to unduly prejudice our aggrieved countrymen for whom RA 10368 was primarily enacted, and to afford the Human Rights Victims Claims Board sufficient period to discharge its statutory duty, the Human Rights Victims Claims Board should be allowed to extend the period for accepting human rights victims' claims for another 6 months from November 10, 2014, or that is until May 11, 2015, given that the 180th day falls on a Saturday. So this committee believes that this extension will ensure that the laudable objectives of RA 1068 will not be negated, and that our human rights victims will finally get their due. Thus, for these reasons, I humbly ask for the approval of this joint resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pimentel. Senator Soto is recognized. I assume Senator Soto is availing of the period of interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished gentleman yield to some questions to refresh myself on the intent and the contents of the Senate Joint Resolution, Mr. President?
With pleasure, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. My attention was focused on the last whereas, where you mention, or the Senate Joint Resolution mentions about the life of the board. As I said at the outset, I wanted to refresh myself on a resolution we passed last May 2014. When you say the board, you mean the claims board, Mr. President. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. President. And just to add, for the information of everybody, there are two periods that we should take note of.
Mm-hmm.
The period for governing the life of the board, which is 2 years, and the period to file claims, which is 6 months. And both periods are reckoned from, or will start from, May 12, 2014, because that is the date considered to be the effectivity date of the IRR of RA 10368.
May 14 of
Yes,
2014.
sir. May 12, sir.
May
May 12,
12.
2014.
When did we pass the resolution, Mr. President?
Which resolution?
The resolution creating the board.
It is a law, Mr. President, RA 10368, effective on, let me check, Mr. President. Okay, in the copy that I have, approved February 25, 2013, Mr. President. Tama.
That was when the board was created, Mr. President. Is that right?
Well, this was February 25, 2013 would be
The passage of the measure or the Republic Act.
yes, sir.
But you would like to say that the effectivity is May 4th or May 12th because of the IRR. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. President. But the IRR was, of course, drafted by the board. So the board was organized February 13, 2014.
All right.
Mr. President.
What is the composition of the board, Mr. President?
Ilan ba yan? Okay. 9 members with 1 chair and 8 members. That makes it 9.
9 members with the chair.
Saan ba yun, Doc?
And it is in the... How were they chosen, Mr. President? Did we include that in Republic Act 10-368? As I said, I would need a distinguished gentleman from Mindanao to re-educate me on the law, because
The appointment, Mr. President, is found in Section 9 of the law.
mhm.
They were all appointed by the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Mr. President.
All right.
From nominations submitted to the President by NGOs. It's in Section 9, Mr. President.
Section 9 of Republic Act 10368.
Yes, sir.
What is the lifespan of the board, Mr. President?
2 years, Mr. President.
And the mandate is
The mandate is found in Section 10, Mr. President. But basically, the long and short of it is that they are to award reparations or compensation to confirmed and validated human rights victims from a fund which is already in the possession of the government, and to memorialize the martial law experience as well as the human rights violations through a memorial commission, which will be created in the future. Yeah, which is already constituted, Mr. President. There's a memorial commission.
how was it constituted, Mr. President? The Memorial Commission.
Yeah, which section of the law? Section of the law. Section 26, Mr. President, and 27. There is hereby created a commission to be known as the Human Rights Violations Victims Memorial Commission. So it's in the same law, Mr. President, which created that memorial commission.
All right. Mr. President, so just for the record, what is the main intent of Senate Joint Resolution number 10?
It's only to, we are not changing the law. There is no amendment to the law except as to that period. Only one period is involved, Mr. President. The period to accept claims from human rights victims. When they file a claim for reparation. Because
So-
that original period, Mr. President, will if we do not pass this joint resolution, will expire on November 10, 2014.
There is also an extension on the life of the board.
No, sir. Not,
Yes.
not on this resolution. Is that?
Well, that is precisely
Yes.
my first
No,
point.
yes, sir.
The last whereas.
Because the committee report will, there are amendments. There are amendments to be introduced, Mr. President.
I
And
see.
we are making actually the topic very simple, and we are focusing on one period. Yes, sir.
All right.
Tama yun. Tama.
Are we 100% sure that we may amend the law by passing the Senate Joint Resolution?
I don't know.
If the chair may respond,
Yes, sir.
Yes,
the
Mr.
joint
President.
resolution is in the nature of a law. That is why we follow the procedure in passing the law, 3 readings before we pass it. And this is approved by the President himself as in ordinary legislation. So it has the effect of a law.
I thought so, Mr. President. I just wanted that on record.
Thank you. Thank
you
you,
know
sir.
you know the usual saying in the olden times. And when I say the olden times, those were the times in the 9th Congress when I heard the Senate President always coming down and telling me, "Huwag ka na magtanong, resolution lang yan, ipasa na natin."
Especially, Mr. President, when the joint resolution focuses on one sole issue, Mr. President.
Yes.
One
All
topic. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the gentleman for enlightening me on the intent of the resolution. I have no further interpolations.
May I call for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
1 minute suspension. Bob.
So we have 6 committee amendments.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, no other senator has expressed his or her intent to interpolate on the measure, so I move that we close the period of interpolation on Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
Period for interpolation is terminated.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we open the period of committee amendments on Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
Any objection? Hearing none. Period for committee amendments is in order. Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. President, may I be recognized for the committee amendments? We have 6 committee amendments.
Please proceed, Mr. Sponsor.
On page 2, delete the entire second paragraph. I so move, Mr. President.
The entire second paragraph, which starts with whereas the extension of work, is that the referral to
Sabay, ano?
the second paragraph on page 2, just for the record?
Let me double check, Mr.
Can
President. Yes, sir.
the sponsor read the paragraph being deleted?
Whereas the extension of the work period of the board will likewise allow it to provide the necessary quality deliberation and adjudication time and effort commensurate to the huge number of persons seeking reparation and recognition under the law, consistent with the spirit of RA number 10368. We move for its deletion, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. The committee amendments deleting the whereas clause found on page 2 as read by the sponsor is hereby approved. Next amendment.
On page 2, on the third paragraph, delete the phrase as well as the life of the board.
As well as the life of the board.
Yes, Mr. President. Or do you want me to continue for the entire paragraph? Okay, Mr. President.
Before you do that, the minority leader is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, I'm not too sure about what the second amendment he wanted, but the original the original proposal to remove as well as the life of the board. Therefore, we will be will allow it to fulfill. We just want to be clarified that when you say it,
yes, sir, I will.
the board.
Yes, sir, I will continue. That's
Thank you.
so.
Yes, please
Okay,
proceed.
this is the second amendment on page 2 on the third paragraph. Delete the phrase as well as the life of the board, and let us change the word it between the words allow and to the board. So that the third paragraph will now read as follows. Whereas the extension of the period for filing of claims for reparation and recognition will allow the board to fulfill its mandate and help enhance human rights as the vital nexus connecting the sacrifices and heroism of the past to building a fair and functioning Philippine society for tomorrow.
All right. I think that clarifies the import of the whereas clause. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, Mr. President, delete the entire fifth paragraph. We so move, Mr. President.
The fifth paragraph, if the sponsor doesn't mind, please read on the record for easy reference.
Resolve further to direct the Human Rights Victims Claims Board, HRVCB, to establish permanent application centers / desks in all regional offices of the Commission on Human Rights to guarantee the accessibility thereto to the qualified victims in filing their claims within the application period. So we move that this entire paragraph be deleted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, to delete the entire sixth paragraph, which reads as follows. Resolve further to extend the life of the HRVCB for another period of 6 months from May 12, 2016 to complete its work, after which it shall become functus officio.
This is being this is proposed to be deleted.
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Ano ba? 6 na yun? 6 yan? 7th na. On page 2, delete the entire paragraph, which reads as follows. Resolved finally that the amount necessary to implement the provisions of this act shall be included in the annual General Appropriations Act. We move for its deletion, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And last but not the least, Mr. President, in the title, delete the comma after the year 2013 and delete the phrase, and in consequence thereof, comma, the existence of the Human Rights Victims Claims Board. So that the title will now read as follows. Joint Resolution extending the period for filing of claims for reparation of human rights violations victims, comma, under Republic Act number 10368, comma, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
That would be all, Mr. President, for committee amendments.
What is the Senator Soto is recognized.
Mr. President, if we amended, if we amended and removed the 3 resolutory portions, therefore, and then in the title we are extending the board, the existence of the board.
No, we are not.
Huh?
We are not, as far as I can see.
The amendment was just to remove and in consequence thereof. Are we retaining the existence of the Human Rights Victims Claims Board in the title?
I mentioned the entire phrase, Mr. President. Delete the phrase, and in consequence thereof, the existence of the Human Rights Victims Claims Board.
So what happens to the board? We are extending the
period of filing claims.
For filing claims, yes, but we are not extending the life.
That's correct. In other words, the board is mandated in effect to finish all its work as it in the original period that they were supposed to exist, and that is up to May 12, 2016. That is the life of the board is not touched.
So may we hear again the title, Mr. President?
I am willing to read it again, Mr. President.
Please read the title again.
Tama ba yung title natin? Wala na mistake. Okay. Joint Resolution extending the period for filing of claims for reparation of human rights violations victims under Republic Act number 10368, otherwise known as the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013.
Okay.
Okay, accepted, Mr. President. I have no. May I just have? May I ask one question to the distinguished sponsor, Mr. President, before we close the period?
Please proceed.
In Republic Act 10368, I think it is confined solely in a period in the history of our country. Do we not, or could we not include other human rights violations after 1986, like the killing of journalists and the like?
The sponsor may respond.
In that case, Mr. President, if you want to expand it, I think we need to amend the law.
We need to
Because
propose an amendment
is,
to Republic Act 10368.
That is
Therefore,
clearly found in Section 3, Paragraph B, Mr. President. So we need, in my humble opinion, Mr. President, if we want to expand the period covered by the claims board, we have to amend the law.
with that coming from the bar top notcher, Mr. President, I will agree and probably draft a bill to amend 10368. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soto. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
Before we act, can we suspend it for 1 minute? Suspend. Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I withdraw that motion, and I move that we close the period of committee amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection hearing none, period for committee amendments is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, no senator has indicated their intention for any individual amendments. So we move that we approve on second reading.
We close first the period for individual amendments. Therefore,
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, no senator has indicated their intention for individual amendments, so I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
the period for individual amendments terminated.
Mr. President, now we move that we approve on second reading Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
Any objection? Hearing none. The joint resolution extending the period for filing of claims for reparation of human rights violations victims under Republic Act 10386 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the consideration.
Mr. President,
Yes,
before we
before
suspend
that-
consideration of this measure, Mr. President.
Sorry?
May I be recognized before we suspend the consideration?
We are going to, okay, yes, Senator
yes, sir.
Pimentel.
Can I make of record at least the interpretation of the sponsor on the provision on the waiver? Because Section 23 mentions a waiver, and since there is a very big possibility that we will pass this resolution, it has the force and effect of law. The interpretation of the sponsor is that the failure to file an application within the said period is deemed a waiver of the right to file the same, which is mentioned in Section 23, shall mean the failure to file an application within the original period and as well as the extended period.
The chair concurs with that
That
opinion. That is the effect
Yes,
of
sir.
extending the
Just
period.
for the record, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, now may I move to suspend the consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 10 under Committee Report number 87.
So suspended.
Mr. President, before we call on Senator Marcos for the sponsorship of the Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014, I would like to acknowledge a number of our youth leaders in the hall. Let me start with Commissioner Joe John Paul Peñol of the National Youth Commission and Chairperson Rafaela David of Akbayan Youth.
All right, the presence of our visitors is made of record, and we welcome them to the Senate.
I'd also like to acknowledge a number of organizations here, the SK Reform Coalition, Akbayan Youth, the PNU Student Government, the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines, World City College, the Muslim Christian Youth for Peace and Development, the Heritage Conservation Society Youth, Alyansang Tapat sa Lasalista, DLSU Manila, Youth Leaders Club, Antipolo, the Filipino Liberal Youth represented by Mr. Jiggy Kalukag and Mr. Kelvin Sangir, the Alliance of Medical Students Association, NAPSI Youth, and Big Kiss UP Manila, Mr. President.
Their presence is acknowledged.
Mr. President, at this point, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 2401 under Committee Report number 75 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopt motion approved.
I move that we consider Senate Bill number 2401 under Committee Report number 75.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And now, with the permission of the body, Mr. President, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 2401, an act establishing enabling mechanisms for meaningful youth participation in nation building, strengthening the Sangguniang Kabataan, creating the municipal, city, and provincial youth development councils, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Marcos to sponsor the measure.
Senator Marcos is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I have the honor to report Senate Bill number 2401, taking into consideration Senate Bill number 68 and 1090 under Committee Report number 75. The substitute bill is entitled An Act Establishing Enabling Mechanisms for Meaningful Youth Participation in Nation Building, Strengthening the Sangguniang Kabataan, Creating the Municipal, City, and Provincial Youth Development Councils, and for other purposes. Article 2, Section 13 of the Constitution provides that the state recognizes the vital role of the youth in nation building and shall promote and protect their physical, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well-being. It shall inculcate in the youth patriotism and nationalism and encourage their involvement in public and civic affairs. Pursuant thereto, the Local Government Code of 1991, specifically under Book 3, Chapters 8 to 10 thereof, had mandated the creation of a Sangguniang Kabataan and provides for its structure, the qualifications and terms of office, the powers and duties, as well as the privileges of its officers. However, there is a general observation that the SK under the present structure has lost its effectiveness in advancing the democratic ideals of service-oriented youth leadership. Some have observed that SK leaders have become so politicized and susceptible to dishonest practices in handling public funds that are entrusted to them for the projects and programs intended for the welfare of their constituents. As a result, there is a strong clamor from different sectors of society, on the one hand, for the in-depth evaluation of the SK and to institute reforms therein, and on the other hand, there is an equally strong clamor for its complete abolition. I am one with a view that the current structure of the SK has failed to serve the envisioned purposes for our youth. Thus, before the scheduled synchronized barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections on October 28, 2013, I filed Senate Bill number 1186, which later became RA 10632, which postponed the said elections to a date between October 28, 2014 and February 15, 2015 to be determined by the COMELEC. Let me emphasize, however, that my respect and high hopes for our youth remain. Our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, once said, "The youth is the hope of the fatherland." This message is timeless and will forever continue to reverberate. Just like the creation of the Kabataan Barangay placed under the office of the President for direct supervision, I am fervent in my belief that youth participation is an important component of nation building. The differing arguments have been clearly expounded during the various hearings of the Committee on Local Government. While the committee recognized as valid some of the arguments, those espousing for the abolition of the SK, we believe that abolition should not be an option. The youth sector is the largest sector in the country today, and we could not call ourselves a representative government if they are to be excluded. This sector has very specific concerns that require the intervention and support of government without a voice in government. Young people will not get that intervention and support. Also, we must bring young people into government to prepare the new generation of leaders to carry on with the work, bringing with them new energy, new ideas, and fired by a passion and idealism that burns strong in young people. I am confident that this is the sentiment shared by my colleagues in this House. The principle of youth participation is important and must be encouraged. It is the system of youth participation that clearly needs to be reformed. Youth participation in local governance and in nation building, as guaranteed by the Constitution, should always be upheld and not be reduced to just token participation. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, allow me to present to you the salient features of the proposed reforms. The age range of the Katipunan ng Kabataan is raised from the current 15 to 17 bracket to 15 to 24. The officers of the Sangguniang Kabataan must be at least 18 years old, but not more than 24 years of age at the time of the election. These proposed amendments will primarily address the concern that our SK officers are below the age of majority, which makes them ineligible to sign contracts and incur other obligations. This legal impediment has practically exposed our young leaders to pressure and interference from some unscrupulous officials in the implementation of their programs and projects. If our SK officers are of legal age, then they are ready and capable for full accountability. This brings us to another important amendment, which seeks to ensure their fiscal autonomy. It is thus proposed that the Sangguniang Barangay should appropriate the SK funds in lump sum, which shall be disbursed solely for youth development and empowerment purposes and shall be deposited in a government-owned bank in the name of the Sangguniang Kabataan concerned. The funds shall be allocated in the annual budget in accordance with the adopted annual Barangay Youth Development Plan. As to the structure of the organization, we will maintain the current structure of the SK in the barangay level with the election of a chairperson and 7 members. The chairperson shall automatically serve as an ex officio member of the Sangguniang Barangay. However, in the municipal, city, and provincial levels, the federated SK president will no longer automatically serve as ex officio member of the concerned local Sanggunian. It is thus proposed that a local youth development council be created in every municipality, city, and province, which shall be composed of not more than 2 official representatives of the following classifications of duly organized and or accredited youth and youth-serving organizations who are at least 15 but not more than 24 years of age, namely the Sangguniang Kabataan, student councils or Sangguniang Mag-aaral of public and private secondary schools, student councils of public and private tertiary schools, out-of-school youth, working youth, young entrepreneurs and young professional organizations, youth with specific needs organizations, faith-based youth organizations, and finally, ideology-based youth organizations. Within 1 month from the conduct of the SK elections in the case of municipalities and cities, and within 45 days in the case of provinces, and every year thereafter, the local government operations officer shall convene all the members of the council to elect its officers. The duly proclaimed presidents of the Youth Development Council shall serve as ex officio members of their respective local Sanggunian. This proposed structure will ensure wide and profound youth participation in local governance. The Sangguniang Kabataan is also designed to train young Filipinos to become leaders. So it is imperative to devise a training program for our youth leaders. It is thus proposed that before any SK official or any member of the council will assume office, they must undergo a mandatory training program which will have 2 basic components. Number 1, reorientation on patriotism, nationalism, values enhancement towards nation building. And number 2, capability building on leadership, program and project development, and sustainability, financial management, accountability, and transparency. Furthermore, a training fund with an initial amount of 50 million pesos is established from available sources to be jointly managed by the National Youth Commission and the Department of the Interior and Local Government. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, even after the submission of this committee report for plenary considerations, I continued my consultations on the proposed amendments with the youth sectors in different parts of the country, as well as with the authors of the subject bills, Senators Bam Aquino and Senator J.V. Ejercito. Two important issues came out, and these can be further deliberated upon and can be the subject of committee amendments with the permission of this body. The first is raising the age ceiling for members of the Katipunan ng Kabataan from 24 to 30. This is to conform to the definition of youth in Republic Act 8044 or the Act creating the National Youth Commission. It will also benefit the SK organization as the younger members will be guided by the experience and knowledge of the elder members. Second, the SK Federated President shall remain as ex officio member of the Sanggunian in rightful recognition of the mandate given to them by the Katipunan ng Kabataan. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am hopeful that the proposed amendments to the Sangguniang Kabataan will usher our youth to a more productive and dynamic participation in governance, that it will train and guide them to a more mature role in public service, and that the singular challenges faced by young people will be given attention by government. As chairman of the Committee on Local Government, I am pleased and honored to present to you Committee Report number 75 for the consideration of this august body. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Ejercito to co-sponsor the measure.
Senator Ejercito is recognized to co-sponsor the measure.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I am for the approval of Senate Bill number 2401 under Committee Report number 75, otherwise known as the Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014, or more commonly known as SK Reform. As one of the principal authors and sponsors of this measure, I'd foremost like to express my sincerest gratitude to Senator Bongbong Marcos, Senator Bam Aquino for providing their extensive knowledge in crafting this bill. Mr. President, I hope that by having a young Marcos, a young Aquino, and a young Ejercito Estrada in this legislative effort, we can attain unity among the youth leaders towards this bill. I've always believed that the human resource is the country's most precious resource. We should invest in the talents, skills, and future of the Filipino youth, the new breed of leaders of this nation, to make sure that this resource is not wasted, but put into good use. We need to invest in our youth to prepare them for life and leadership. As one of the leaders today, I consider it as my personal duty to pass the baton of leadership and excellence responsibly to our future leaders, thus abolishing the Sangguniang Kabataan and depriving the Filipino youth from participation in local governance is never in my options. Abolishing the SK is a disservice to the Filipino youth, to their future, and to our country as a whole. The Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014 is a piece of remarkable legislation that genuinely seeks to reform and strengthen the mandate of the 1987 Constitution for youth empowerment. The proposed reform made with this legislation comes in three forms. First is the adjustment of the age bracket of the officers of the Sangguniang Kabataan from 18 to 24 years old. This is to include young leaders who have already attained the age of the majority, youth leaders who can enter into contracts, agreements, and make mature decisions on their own, much more in taking responsibilities for governance, participation in community activities, and in nation building. Second is the creation of the Local Youth Development Council, or LYDC, in every province, city, and municipality all over the country to ensure wider and multi-sectoral youth participation. The ultimate goal of the LYDC is to avert exclusivity in youth participation by permitting representatives from the SK, student councils of high school and tertiary schools, out-of-school youth, working youth, youth with specific needs, community-based youth, faith-based youth, and ideology-based youth organizations to be involved in all matters that affect, represent, and entail the Filipino youth. As a result of the creation of the LYDC, the procedure for accreditation and registration of youth in youth-serving organizations is introduced in this measure. Finally, is the safety clause placed to prevent the perpetuation of political dynasties in the Sangguniang Kabataan. The SK has been long argued to be an easy venue for political dynasties to proliferate. In fact, this is one of the major clamors as to why people are too eager to abolish the SK. The Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014 prohibits an individual from seeking an elective SK official that has relatives with any incumbent elected national, local, or barangay official within the fourth civil degree of consanguinity or affinity. This preventive clause is placed to minimize the clout of politicians already in power. As a former youth leader, Mr. President, I have long witnessed this conflict of interest and the hardship that youth leaders themselves endure just to please their political clans. I also believe that the proliferation of political dynasties in the SK is a disservice to the Filipino youth and does not fulfill the mandate of the Constitution for youth empowerment. It is high time that politicians do not urge their children or keen to seek for an SK post. It is high time now for us to give chance to new, bright, and promising young leaders. I am seeking to enact these three outstanding reforms in the SK in order to revamp and create a more enabling environment for positive youth engagement and empowerment that would help shape the good leaders of tomorrow. Efforts by certain quarters to completely abolish SK undermines the youth representations in our local government units and a betrayal to the Filipino youth. I agree that there were some defects and flaws in the previous SK law, and this measure aims to enhance youth involvement in social development. Ginoong Pangulo, mga kapwa mambabatas, tungkulin po natin na kalingain at ikinaguyod ang interes at karapatan ng ating mga kabataan. Huwag po sana tayo mawala ng pag-asa sa ating mga kabataan at susunod na salinlahi. Patuloy po sana natin pagsikapan na ilatag ang mga kinakailangan para mapagpalitaw tayo na makabagong leader ng ating bayan mula sa kabataan. Ang sabi nga po ng ating dakilang bayani na si Jose Rizal, ang kabataan, ang pag-asa ng bayan. Dapat po siguro madagdagan na ang kabataan sila ay dapat maasahan. It is therefore my fervent hope that the passage of Senate Bill 2401 or the Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014 be immediately sought. Mabuhay ang kabataan Pilipino. Marami po salamat, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat, Senador Ejercito, the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that I be recognized to give my co-sponsorship speech.
The Acting Majority Leader, Senator Bongbong, is recognized to deliver a co-sponsorship speech.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon, magandang hapon sa ating lahat. It is my honor and privilege to stand before you today to support the development of our Filipino youth leaders and spur the next set of Filipino heroes. As I co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2401 under Committee Report number 75, otherwise known as the Youth Development and Empowerment Act of 2014. In a country where more than half of the population is under 30 years old, it is our duty to provide an enabling environment for the youth to be able to participate in building our nation. The Filipino youth have the innate energy, creativity, and innovative ideas to come up with new solutions to address the age-old problems of our country. It is thus urgent to harness their full potential as a partner in the development of our country, to acknowledge their active participation in programs and projects of communities, and engage them in transparent and accountable governance. Ang kabataan po ay hindi lang ang pag-asa sa kinabukasan ng ating bayan, may kakayahan po silang maging bahagi sa pagbabago na kinakailangan ngayon sa ating kasalukuyan. Mr. President, para sa inyong kaalaman, ang title ng una kong panukala para sa bill na ito ay Liga ng Bayaning Kabataan. And even though this name was not carried in the final committee report, We chose that title because we believe that the reforms for the Sangguniang Kabataan would develop more heroes among our Filipino youth who are ready to sacrifice and give their time, talents, and resources for the benefit of our countrymen. Mr. President, my career as a public servant started in the youth movements, where I served as a member of the Student Council, which promoted volunteerism among our fellow students, and even at times went to the streets to fight for the social issues of those days. Nung ako po'y naging chairperson ng National Youth Commission noong 2003, binuo po namin ang 10 Accomplished Youth Organization Awards or TAYO Awards na hanggang po ngayon ay nagbibigay parangal sa pinakamagagaling na youth organizations sa ating bansa. We recognize these youth groups that have made an impact all over the country through projects in education, health, livelihood, and the like. Isa po sa mga nanalo in previous years ay ang Gualandi Volunteer Service Program Inc. or GVSP ng Cebu. Natuklasan po nila na isa sa bawat 3 batang pipit-bingi ay namomolestya sa kanilang lungsod. Kaya gumawa po sila ng information campaign laban sa sexual abuse ng mga kabataang ito upang kilalanin ang karapatan ng mga persons with disabilities. Napansin naman po ng Diri Jose Initiatives sa Cagayan de Oro ang mga batang lansangang naaadik po sa rugby. Tinipon po nila ang mga ito, pinakain, binigyan ng arts education at livelihood training para di na po malulun sa droga at magkaroon ng mas magandang kinabukasan. Isa pong halimbawa ay ang Hayag Youth Organization ng Ormoc City. Tinuruan po nilang lumangoy ang mga kabataan sa kanilang lugar at nagbigay po sila ng iba pang water disaster preparedness training bilang paghahanda sa mga sakuna. Nung dumagsa po ang bagyong Yolanda, walang nalunod o naaksidente sa kanilang mga miyembro dahil sa kanila pong training program. Mr. President, the Gualandi Volunteer Service Program, Diri Jose Initiatives, Hayag Youth Organizations are just 3 youth groups among thousands who have spent their time creating relevant and innovative projects that address different issues in their communities, such as PWD abuse, drug addiction, disaster risk preparedness, and management. Admittedly, these days, if we talk about the SK, there seems to be a disconnect with the youth that I have mentioned and the reality on the ground for a number of Sangguniang Kabataan. But today, dear colleagues, Mr. President, we have the opportunity to change this notion if we pass this measure, the 2014 Sangguniang Kabataan Reform Bill. We want to create that enabling environment for more young people to serve and find the heroism in them. And hence, we are pushing for the reforms found in this bill. After much debate and discussion, we want to highlight today 3 points which we feel will encourage more young people to participate and spur the heroism that we know is in all of us. These are, firstly, expanding the age limit, secondarily, creating the local youth development council, and lastly, ensuring more relevant programs and projects of the SK all over the country. We propose to expand the age range from 15 to 30 years old in accordance to Republic Act 8044 or the Youth in Nation Building Act of 1994 and to peg the age of officers between 18 to 24. The reform in the age range will enable a greater number of youth to participate and give officials more independence in their affairs, such as signing contracts, disbursing monies, and making them more accountable for their actions. The second major reform which we are pushing for is the introduction of the LYDC, or the Local Youth Development Council, a council that will support the Sangguniang Kabataan and ensure the participation of more Filipino youth through youth organizations. The LYDC will compose of representatives from different youth organizations in the community, student councils, church and youth faith groups, youth-serving organizations, and community-based youth groups. It aims to harmonize, broaden, and strengthen all programs and initiatives of the local government and non-government organizations for the youth sector. The LYDC will serve as both a guide and a refuge for the SK so that their programs and policies will be rooted in the needs of the various youth that are present in their communities. Mr. President, ang mga lungsod po ng Pasay, Naga at Cebu ay kasalukuyang meron ng mga LYDC upang mahikayat ang kanilang mga kabataang makibahagi sa mga programa ng kanilang LGU. Sa Pasay, bahagi po ang kabataan sa cleanliness at peace and order programs at sa mga livelihood programs ng lungsod. Sa Naga naman, nag-focus po sila sa paggawa ng mga training at seminars para sa pisikal, pang-akademiko, psychological at values formation ng kabataan. At sa Cebu naman, nag-focus po sila sa pagtatayo ng mga dormitoryo para sa kanilang migrant youth na nag-aaral sa iba't ibang universidad sa Cebu Province. In my time as the chairman of the National Youth Commission, I saw that the LYDC is a proven structure that can not only develop our sangguniang kabataan to be better leaders, but ensure that their decisions, actions, and priorities are in line with the needs of the youth in their area. Lastly, Mr. President, we're pushing for the enumeration of clear themes of the programs and projects that can be explored by both the LYDC and the SK in formulating their youth development plans to weed out tokenistic projects, having programs for the sake of having programs. These programs which we envision need to meet the goals of promoting meaningful youth participation in nation building, sustainable youth development and empowerment, equitable access to quality education, environmental protection, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction and resiliency, youth employment and livelihood, health and anti-drug abuse, gender sensitivity, capacity and capability building, and even sports development. We hope that the bill will also clarify the relationships between the Sangguniang Kabataan, the National Youth Commission, and the Department of Interior and local government, so that by doing so, we ensure that the programs and policies that they will come up with on a local level will be in line with the national youth development goals and be truly relevant and impactful for the sector they are supposed to serve. Mr. President, it is urgent and important that we reform the SK as a platform for engaging the youth at the grassroots level, where the youth can be honed to become better and more effective public servants in the future. It's now time to work on strengthening our leadership institutions, particularly youth development programs, to form new leaders with technical and management competence and are grounded with Filipino values. Kung itataguyod po natin ang kapakanan ng kabataang Pilipino, mabibigyan po natin sila ng pagkakataong gamitin ang kanilang likas na pagiging malikhain at madiskarte sa paggawa ng mga bagong proyekto at programa para sa ating bansa. Let me end with a quote from Professor Ambeth Ocampo, historian, youth advocate, who mentioned that our heroes were young when they changed the course of history. And I quote, Jose Rizal published the Noli Me Tangere at 26, Juan Luna painted the Spolarium at 27, and Bonifacio began the revolution at 30. So if you think about it, all of our heroes are young. It's imperative that we provide that enabling environment for more young Filipinos to be the heroes that our country needs. Maraming salamat po. Magandang hapon. Mabuhay ang kabataang Pilipino.
Maraming salamat, Senator Bam Aquino.
Mr. President, may I ask for a 1-minute suspension?
Suspended for 1 minute.
Mr. President, ready to resume?
Session is resumed.
I'm enjoying these dual hats today, Mr. President, of recognizing myself. I move that we suspend the consideration of Senate Bill number 2401 under Committee Report number 75.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, November 17, 2014.
In accordance with our legislative calendar, the session for today is adjourned until 3 p.m. November 17, 2014, Monday. Session is adjourned.